See, it's
Good
one.
evening, everyone. I would like to call the actual committee meeting order. Can I have an approval of the agenda, please? First, I second by Mr. Fang. Anyone have anything that we need to fix on that? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Can I have an approval of the minutes for September 18th, please? Mr. Forsythe, seconded by Mr. Janisha and Mr. Perkins. Any questions or discussion on the minutes? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
So, have an update.
Here you can speak. What do you want? All about.
Wait,
Maybe. Maybe.
on the agenda, the update, New York State Senator Dan Stack from District 45. We just need to know. Please. Thank you, sir, for joining. Go right ahead.
It's gonna be up today, and I noticed it just coincided with the meeting, so figured, catch everybody in one shot all at once and answer any questions you may like. The brief update is hopefully most of you know, legislative session ended in June. And we won't be going back in unless we publish the 17th of January. So I'm trying to catch up on what's going on in the district. And I was out of the country. A legislative exchange visit to Ireland. Got back a little over a week ago. Everyone survived. And so now we're playing a little catch up. Wanted to get up here. I spent a little bit of time in Potsdam and Messina, and then closed out the day with some office hours. And thought I'd just catch all of you. Everyone's asking what's next. What do I expect next year? The governor and others have definitely started to sound alarm bells and lowering expectations as to the budget. The financial piece of the budget. You all have heard me complain over the years with how much non-financial stuff is part of the budget, and that will certainly be true again. But the actual dollars and cents, I think they're starting to express concern. So. When everyone is saying that at all, I think we take that next. We're looking at a very challenging budget year next year. As far as issues and substance beyond the budget, immigration has been in the news a lot all along. You all, and I want to commend St. Lawrence County for being the forefront on the issue. You didn't see that role, but you got it pointed in your direction a few times in a bipartisan manner, and I think in a very fair, even-handed manner. You said, hey, we're not in a position to receive New York City's problem here. You don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the finances, and that's true. And I don't think that makes you bad people or bad Americans. I think that makes you honest people doing your jobs, representing your constituents. How the airport got volunteered at one point as something to look at. It's still a mystery to me. It sounds like it came out of Washington, D.C. So at least it wasn't Albany that suggested you remember the bus. But again, I wanted to to acknowledge that I think that will be a major issue of discussion going forward next year. Probably more than most. The crime issues, the gun issues. I know that recent ammunition background check legislation that was passed in Albany went into effect here last month, and so as it was getting closer, that's when people started to realize this was coming. I'm on record, and I think all your local legislators are on record in similar vein. Questioning certainly the constitutionality of what we're doing, but also the results. It's really going to improve public safety or eliminate gun violence, or is this really designed to just make things miserable for people that want to purchase ammunition, and certainly for your small businesses that sell it. So I report that just because those are the main issues that I'm hearing about in my office from our constituents, both here in St. Louis County, but throughout the Senate district. So I think that next year's, going to be a very difficult year budget wise. And I think that the county should be prepared for that. As you move forward with your budget process, I recall my days when I was the chair of the board in Warren County, and this is the budget season, and you don't have a crystal ball, but anything that changes after you pass your budget, you're going to be forced to deal with, like the EF map. I think is a really good example of a major financial surprise that, again, the average person reading the newspaper, the average taxpayer, they don't know what EF map is, but if you say, well, they changed the Medicaid rules and that passed it on to the counties. Now, some people are starting to recognize what you're talking about, but this is really down in the weeds inside baseball, but it was big dollars to every county. And the disturbing part of it to me was that while the governor had mentioned desire to do this and put it in her draft budget, both the Senate and the Assembly, one House bills flatly rejected it. And usually when that happens and people stop talking about it, it goes away. But when the budget finally came out, we were a few weeks late this time, but when the budget finally came out, like a day or two before we voted on it, EF map was back on the table and included. So it snuck up on everybody and it got passed on to the counties. So I suspect that you should be prepared for bad surprises like that moving forward next year. As far as what's coming from us, the migrant crisis in New York City that Mayor Adams initially welcomed before actually seeing people get off a bus and having the stroke checks to pay for it. He asked for $3 billion from the state last year, and he was given a little over $1 billion from the state. And now the number that's floated around is that it's the total need is a $12 billion. Now, $12 billion is a lot of money even for New York State. That number is a number that can't be ignored and won't easily be paid for. That number is a big enough number where you will have people like the governor and mayor walking back their sanctuary status because it's just financially it's not feasible for the state. I'll give the credit, some credit to the governor for being willing to walk. I mean, no person likes to ever admit I didn't have it right, or I was wrong, or I want to change my mind and change my direction. I think most credit should go for getting it right in the first place, or listening to other people around you so that you don't have to walk it back. But human nature being what it is, and political nature being what it is, it's hard to say I was wrong about something as important as the cost of financial costs of the state and city on migrants. But with that said, the issue is still here. It doesn't go away, even if we all agree in Albany that, all right, good. And we agree that this was a bad spot we're in. Now we still have to deal with it, and that's going to come at a cost. And I don't know how it's going to be dealt with. I'm sure I probably won't like most of how it gets dealt with, and I'm sure that it'll add cost. And in adding cost, then that means either taxes are going up or we're not doing something else that government ought to be doing. So that's what I'm on the lookout for, and I hesitate to speak for the rest of my colleagues that I overlap, whether it's Senator Walczyk or our assembly members. But I know all of them, and I was in assembly with the other assembly members. I think that your representation is more or less on the same page with what we're hoping to see out of Albany. We're not happy, but I don't have a crystal ball to tell you, but that's the snapshot that I wanted to give you. And again, we're a few months away now from the start of the legislative session, but the word is already out there to stand by for a tough budget. Happy news.
So one of the things I would say is the CF money, MAP money going away in February, which she's taken. She's also increased what New York State Medicaid has to pay for. So not only has she increased the cost to counties and what she said, you will pay for this. she's taking money that's supposed to pay. So, keep that in mind. And then I just kind of wanted you to touch a little bit on electric buses, which, as we all know, do not work in St. Louis.
So on the electrification front, I'm frustrated, I mean, there's not a lot of engineers in the legislature. You've got a Clarkson one in the 45th Senate district, although I wasn't elected engineer, but I do have background in the Navy nuclear power program. But you know what, anyone that has shopped for living room furniture or a new kitchen appliance in recent times knows all about the supply chain and how long that lead times can be for materials. Likewise, anyone that's tried to hire a contractor to do an addition or roof or deck, you're waiting a long time, and anyone that talks to any employer, they can't find workers. Whether it's because people don't want to work anymore after the COVID hangover is that, certain part of the population got a taste for, I don't have to work, and now I don't want to go back to work. But bottom line is that there's a shortage of labor as well, and now we're trying to mandate on a non-engineer determined timeline, electrification of every new construction building 7 stories or less, conversion to all electric vehicle fleet, starting with and mandated with the electric buses. And we that we don't have the grid that can support that, which means that we have a major construction project in front of us to upgrade the entire electric distribution system of the state. So now we're not talking about the deck on your house or kitchen appliance. We're talking about, electric power for 19 million people. The timeline that we're on is not feasible. That dollar estimate for the electrification of the state, according to the advocates, was $272 billion. And if the advocates are saying that that's the number, you can probably expect that number to come in closer to twice that. So, on top of that, trying to have the discussion with half the legislature that's from the 5 boroughs, which is a couple hundred miles south of here, and temperatures moderated by the ocean, and the average stop between bus stops, the average distance is measured in yards, not miles. And then you try to have that conversation with a more rural population where it gets a lot colder during the winter. Range is a bigger issue. Nature of the driving is a bigger issue. The one size fits all approach to electrification is a mistake. If we wanted to do something in New York City where it's urban, and I can understand idling traffic in a 9 million person city that already has air quality issues. Sure, electrification buses may work there, but you're not going to have electric highway plow vehicles in the North Country, buses or people that have to commute 50 miles one way in winter. It's different, the nature is different. So I recognize that. I know that my colleagues representing certainly your North Country representation gets it. These arguments have been made in Albany and they've been rejected. I suspect that as we march forward and they start seeing all these deadlines that they said we're going to achieve start to slip, that they will probably pass legislation to change deadlines. But I honestly don't see them changing course unless the financial picture is so awful, where they start to really rethink electrification and extremely expensive. And it's one of 2 people that's going to be paying it. It's either the taxpayer or the ratepayer. But at the end of the day, that's still the same person. It's all of us. I'm glad that you asked about the bus. And there's so many. The average cost of the school bus is going to be doubled, and most schools. Well, that's just it. The range isn't there, as far as from an operations standpoint. Certainly around here, it might work in an urban setting, but it won't work in the North Country. And the National Grid has told schools you don't have the electric service to do what you need to do. So it's beyond just buying buses now. It's upgrading electric services. It's updating garage infrastructure. You can't be charging vehicles out in the weather. You're going to be spending capital money on. So Yeah, thanks for asking me about that.
Mr. Forsythe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator, for coming up. I really appreciate it. And it's all this good, bad news. But
Yeah.
it is what it is. You gotta say it. Couple things that have come up of late. Well, one has been going on for quite some time. The gas price in San Juan County. Right now, a friend of mine just took a picture of Watertown 369. We're 399. It did come down 10 cents last week. On average, we're anywhere from 30 to 50 cents on any given day, more than neighboring counties. And no one has ever been able to explain why. And I've got friends that own convenience stores. They say it's a trucking contract that they bought six months into it. I can't imagine they keep doing the wrong contract every time. So if anyone could come up with the answer to why we pay more for gas in St. Lawrence County than anywhere else.
And
it would
it's
be-
not a function of a tax that you have that the neighboring counties don't have or dropping out. This
No.
is the.
This is
raw-
straight for straight. The other thing is now that we are in the heating season, and you mentioned the $12 billion under the migrant issue. I believe last time I heard the average social security check in San Juan County is right around 1,000 to 1,100. My son called last week to get 275 gallons of fuel at $4.09. 1,125. That's more than the average social security check in San Juan County. People are going to have to decide between heat and food, which they're doing now. $12 billion would go a hell of a long way to offset the costs of these people that don't have a state retirement. They don't have a federal retirement. They just live on their savings and their social security, and they just can't do it.
Now, on the 12 billion, that's my understanding, that's what the
Yeah.
mayor's estimate of the cost is. That's not necessarily his ask, although I'm sure you wouldn't
No,
turn down a check from the state for 12 billion. But he had asked for 3. The
yeah,
other thing that, circling back to that for just a second. I was surprised that more people didn't pick up on this, or that the media didn't pick up on it. He asked for 3 billion from the state. He was given 1 billion. And then when people started rolling into the city and it was getting to be more expensive than he wanted to, he tried to, as you all found out, tried to pawn that off to upstate. And in trying to do that, he was promising all these upstate communities, I'm gonna pay for this. By your own ask, you asked for 3 and got 1. You don't have the money to pay for it. How can you promise 3, I'm gonna pay for it? If I asked for $3 billion to help pay and I only got 1, he can't afford to do it. $1 billion, our entire EPF runs less than $500 million. The chips is, I think statewide chips is around $500 million. I mean, so those 2 items right there, chips you know, that, I mean, that's $1 billion right there. At $227 billion, the state's budget is more than Texas and Florida's combined. And we're the 4th most populated state. They're 2 and 3. A lot of people will say, they're red states. Then if you compare to California, the biggest state, we spend New York State's budget 1.5 times per capita with California spends. So we aren't doing somewhere along the line, we should have been saying no more frequently, or prioritizing differently. I mean, you know, we're still going to have, we're always going to have a budget in the tens or even hundreds of billions, but in recent years, it's ramped up, and now, you know, we're going to have a crisis, and it's a spending crisis more than a revenue crisis. And the other option that people have choosing between heating oil or food, or what state they live in. We lost, you know, 300,000 people in a year, and it wasn't as cold as Messina can get. It wasn't because, you know, not everyone that left is from Messina. I mean, they're leaving from all over the state because they're looking for a better financial. And because we're so portable today, you can work from home. Guess what? Home can be anywhere then. Home can be in a state that taxes you less. And so I think a lot of people have chosen to leave. And that's the first, if you're trying to come up with a measure, how is your state government doing? Are people moving here or moving away from here? That, you know, then you can argue about why they're leaving. Is it the weather, or is it taxes, or is it, you know, crime, or guns or whatever, but people are leaving. And if you can just agree that we're losing people for some reason. What are we doing that states are gaining population doing differently? And I suspect that that's the kind of conversation that we're likely to start to see happen next year, because early on this year, the governor's forewarning, next year is going to be a bad budget year. So we may have some hard conversations. I mean, people are always complaining, you know, what's it going to take to bring us together? Crisis, you know, but who wants to find unanimity or you know, cooperation through crisis? I mean, you know, that's a hell of a way to get there. And hopefully, if we're lucky, our crisis is a budgetary one, not a financial system one, or a insurgent slash terrorist, you know, coming. I mean, I was in Israel on an exchange last December, and you know, they took us all over the country. I was along with Senator Small, and he was on that same trip. We were in that kibbutz that's been all over the news for the atrocities that we were there. It's a community of 800 people, it's a small community. You know, it's not that big. When they show images of it on TV, you recognize it. You know, we've been there, and you know, so we've got, you know, we've got a lot of things that are taking attention and money and energy away from us. And I think that next year, the state's budget is going to be, you know, I'm not trying to paint like the end of the world picture for our budget, but when everybody is saying next year's going to be a bad year, that'll be my 12th year. I've never heard anyone say next year's going to be a bad year. So, and I share that with the county ledge, because I think you should at least be prepared going into your budget. You still got to do what you got to do. But if you're going to rely on which way is the state ball going to bounce and how we are, you know, that's going to input into how you decide things, I'd be cautious on making, you know, blowing assumptions with what's coming out of all of them.
Just to follow up, thank you again,
Yeah, sure.
and sing it loud and clear when you're down there.
You know, I do. I'm not the only one. And there's people on both sides of the aisle that are concerned about finances. That hasn't stopped us, you know, collectively from passing the budgets that we've been passing. You know, I was bothered by that $1 billion, just because it's self-inflicted. You know, the southern states have been dealing with much bigger problems for much longer, and no one should have been surprised that, you know, when you invite people to come and you're going to give away stuff, that people are going to show up, and it's going to cost money, money that we don't have. You have, I had a couple meetings earlier today, and somebody was remarking how here in St. Louis, saw, you know, somebody pushing a shopping cart with their stuff in it and a sleeping bag on top. This isn't somebody that's going to the grocery store. This is homeless. You know, then you start talking about veterans. You know, we've got homeless veterans. Last person in the country actually homeless is a veteran. You know, and if you got to make spending decisions on where to spend money, it becomes real easy for me to say, you know, who do I think should get New York State resident tax dollars? And when you invite these problems and then try to pawn them off on small communities, I mean, I've been in the Messina Airport, impressive place, not JFK. You know, it's smaller. It's a lot smaller than Albany Airport. You're not going to house a dozen people. House a family of 4 there. And yet somehow in Washington, D.C., somebody put this along with 10 other metropolitan centers in the state on a list, you know, of potential sites to send homeless people. It's just, how did that even get on the list? And again, I circle back to that just because I know that you all showed unanimity, but professionalism in your response. You know, there was no grandstanding, there was no finger pointing or name calling. But I think you did the right thing for your county, you know, that you represented in a polite way. We can't do this. This is not our lane. This is not our forte. We don't have the infrastructure. And you know what? That's St. Lawrence County. 50 some odd other counties, you know, your size or smaller, are all in the same boat. So next year is going to be very interesting, and at the center of that is going to be a large dollar amount discussion on the migrant crisis. And my opinion on that is decades coming. bipartisan problem. Both sides own it. And it started and it needs to be fixed in Washington. But now if Washington's not going to fix it, then that means states are going to be forced to figure it out and deal with it on the fly. And we're not equipped to do that. And it's not, we don't have the authority to do it. And if the state doesn't have authority or ability to fix it, then the counties certainly don't have the authority. But yet you're going to deal with it because if they show up on your doorstep, you're going to feed, you're going to clothe, you're going to house, you're going to educate, you know, and that's a lot to ask your taxpayer and in your infrastructure.
Mr. Denisha, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Steck, again, thank you for coming.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. I've got a lot of questions I'd like to ask, but the one I'm going to touch on is the tax cap. Now with the state intercepting FMAP, which potentially costs St. Louis County $3 million. The foreclosure, real estate foreclosures, money that we used to realize that could be up to $600,000 for St. Louis County. So the state, they keep passing the state these unfunded mandates, but we're still have to live within the tax. I think that whole tax cap, you know, when it first started, it was probably reasonable. But the only way, you know, the state wants to maintain, the governor wants to maintain a tax cap while pushing additional financial responsibilities onto the counties. Can't have both.
I agree. So I was a town supervisor and county legislator when the tax cap came into effect. So I was doing local government before and after the tax cap. Politically, very popular with the public, understandably so, right? I mean, you know, your voters like the comfort of knowing that no matter what you do, there's some limit. With that said, either the current governor or the former governor, if they were sitting here and they wanted to be very candid, they would tell you, and it's true, there's a mechanism to override. But politically, that becomes a problem for you all. But there's a mechanism to override. But you're 100% right that back when it went in, inflation was running around 2% a year. Now, in the last couple of years, you know, inflation's running 5, 6, 7, 8, 10%, and that's still 2. And the state is taking revenue away. I mean, everything you said there is 100% accurate. And so it's not fair to do that to the counties. I've always said that I think that local government, in particular county government, I think is the most responsible form of government in New York. You're closest, you're big enough where you're covering all the services that towns and villages don't. But you know, you're close to the people. You know, you're not you know, scheduling a Monday to drive 3 hours to catch you guys. I mean, you're seeing all of your constituents all the time, and you're on the ground, close to where the money is being spent. And it's very easy for the state to push this stuff off or take away like they did EFMAP or the foreclosure money, which is a moratorium. Who knows how long that'll last and how that'll end. And then on top of that, to say, oh, we're also going to send some migrants your way to figure out. I think the state is 100% unfair in the way that they've spent out, especially since inflation got out of control. But again, as a voter, you know, as a resident, as a taxpayer myself, the tax cap's popular. Now, what would be nice is if the state had its own tax cap. Now, Governor Cuomo, when he did his budgets, he prided himself on maintaining tax cap on the operation part of the budget. It wasn't the whole part of the budget. So there's a little asterisk, you know, so the money wonks there will say, well, it wasn't a truth, you know, but I mean, it was something, you know, and he did try to do that. The answer to whatever next year's budget problem is in Albany should not be raising the hell out of taxes, and it should not be passing it on to the counties. But the short answer on the tax cap is, you know, it takes 3 out of 5 votes on the town board to pass a budget. It also takes 3 out of 5 votes on the town board to override the tax cap. A little more complicated when you get to the county level, weighted votes and all that, or when you're all legislators. So you want 2/3 of you need a simple majority to pass a budget, but you need 2/3 to override the cap. I mean, my solution tonight isn't to tell you, just override the cap. I mean, it's true, you have that option, but your point is well taken, in that you're put in an awful spot by state government. You don't control the things that will measure your success or failure when it comes to the tax cap. And that's not fair to do.
Mr. Lightfoot.
Good afternoon, Senator.
Lightfoot?
Again, thank you. There's been a lot of writings in the print media about this digital currency. I know that's a federal thing, not a state thing, but it's going to affect everybody countrywide. And you hear very little about it in the broadcast media. I guess my question is this, is that given, and the focus, as I've read, is you folks that are got money in IRAs and whatnot, you better hang on because you could get hurt. They throw that out there, but they don't tell you how they're going to get hurt or what the purpose of this whole thing is, other than Big Brother watching over everything and everybody. Is there anything that's state of New York, or is there anything in the works or anything contemplated from a blue state to let the Congress and the president know that this is something that this big blue state on the East Coast is not in favor of?
I'm not aware of anything, cooking in Albany on this issue, as far as communicating informally any concerns to, our federal representatives or the president.
So then you're probably not aware of any back chatter from the people that in the federal government, our representatives in the federal government, about where they're coming down on it, because they're very silent about that.
I haven't. As far as federal representative, the one that I have routine communication with is our congresswoman, and I haven't just had a conversation about this with her. It doesn't mean that she doesn't have an opinion on whether they're doing something, but we haven't talked about it.
Okay.
I don't know.
So at least I would strongly appreciate you having that conversation with her, anybody else that'll listen to it, and find out, is this really necessary after all these years? I mean, we got rid of the gold standard and now we're on Federal Reserve notes, and you can see where that is going and has gone. Do we need something else tinkering with our monetary fund and the way we handle our assets? And it just seems to me, based on President Biden's past record, immediate past record, as to some of the BS that he's pulled, that this is just another quiver that he's found in his bag to use and wreak havoc. And I think that's exactly what it's going to do.
Thank you.
Mr. Smithers.
I'd like to thank you for coming,
Yes, sir.
and I have to commend you for doing battle in Albany. For my whole lifetime, seems like there's been the problem of New York City and the rest of the state. So what do we do about that? How can we get those half of the population to get to know us? That's a challenge. I don't know if you have any ideas of how to do that. When our son was in the hospital after he was born for 17 days, and I made 3 or 4 trips down there, they had no idea where I lived. For them, upstate New York was like Yonkers.
Yeah.
Albany was a reach. I would have to call my near the St. Lawrence River, Canada. And so it's so different from us. So how do we get those people that you work with to get to know us? Can we invite them up here for a weekend, or how do we get this understanding of how we are up here? Because they don't understand what we're like up here in St. Lawrence County. How do we do that?
To your point, Governor Cuomo, he had started those Adirondack challenges. And the value that I saw in those was exactly that. This was bringing people from downstate into the Adirondacks, which is great for us, you know, I mean, but the Southern Tier or the Finger Lakes are like, all right, so now they're getting a taste from the Adirondacks that we're, I mean, they're not, their issues aren't identical to ours, but you're right, I think that upstate is, you know, more similar with itself than it is with New York City. So I saw value in the Adirondack Challenge. Now, they're seeing recreational opportunity. They're not necessarily getting a day in the life of what it's like to drive a school bus in January up here, and you know, and that the stops aren't every 150 feet, you know, but in fact, you know, these kids are riding 45 minutes to an hour, and you know, on a colder day, and how's that gonna, you know, would that affect your policy making when it comes to electrification? North Country data systems, North Country co-location services, thank you. In the old, one of the old Alcoa plants, they were looking to see if some legislators would want to come and tour what they're doing on the, you know, on the whole cryptocurrency data mining, the data center. Hard to, you know, get legislators from Buffalo and Long Island to drop everything and come to Messina. For something like that, but events like that happen, but it's usually onesies and twosies. You know, if you've got 213 members of the legislature, you might have 10% of them that make an effort to move around the state and get to learn the state. And again, all politics is local. You know, I mean, in the Bronx, they care about things that are urban issues, and that's all that matters. And you know, so then it becomes my job, Senator Walczyk's job, Ken Blankenbush, Scott Gray, you know, to educate. But the frustrating thing is that the big items, they get negotiated as a block and they get voted on conference, and most of it happens in the budget. You know, so a lot of those policy decisions are all incorporated into a monster negotiations session, and small rural communities start to fall behind the issues of the Long Island, you know, railroad or the transit authority, you know, some of the big, you know, the bigger entities in New York City. Dividing the state, never going to happen. You know, you know, people playing, and I get the frustration, but I also want to be a realist. I don't want to mislead anybody. Believe me, the last thing the rest of the country wants is New York State to have 4 senators. You know, or well, we'll have a autonomous zone. So for that to happen, people that have power would have to yield power, and that's just not likely to happen. And you know, some of the other questions that come up, you know, the decisions that we make that aren't popular are questionable, whether it's student loan forgiveness or gun laws or whatever. They are legal until a court says they're not. And it can sometimes take years, 10 years. The one of the concealed carry law that triggered all the changes a couple of years ago, that and several of them were cute, sarcastic responses to the Supreme Court decision. But that Supreme Court decision a couple of years ago in the Bruin case, that was, or no, it wasn't Bruin, it was a different case. But it was overturning 100-year law, 100-year. So I mean, there's an example where a century, something that was law for 100 years, was ruled unconstitutional a century later. So I get nervous when that's the game that's getting played. Well, we'll do this until, you know, a court overturns it. And but back to your, you know, how do we, you know, there's 320,000 residents for every senator. And for me, that means all 4 counties, half of this county and a little bit of Washington County, 84 towns, 20 villages, 2 cities. That's how I get the 320,000 people. That's measured in blocks down in Queens or Brooklyn. Their issues are very homogeneous. You know, mine are, you know, you've got power authority issues up here. And, you know, down in Essex County, they've got overuse in the Adirondacks. And down in Warren County, you know, they've got issues with they have invasive species on Lake George. But if they're all compressed into a 1 mile square, then they're all about, you know, benefits, services, mass transportation. And so it's frustrating, but it's democracy. A city of 9 million people should have an awful lot of say so. And it does. I like to think, though, that those representatives, the 9 million people, that's a lot of senators, you know, that they have the intellect and the sense of fairness to realize, hey, you know, the tail is part of the dog too. The tail doesn't wag the dog, but the tail is part of the dog. You gotta take care of the tail too. And if that means your rural areas, then you gotta remember that not everything is Manhattan, not everything is, you know, whatever the, you know, the issues are that they're experiencing in the 5 boroughs. And there's a lot of us, you know, I mean, yeah, you know me and Walsik, but you know, there's senators and assembly members from the Southern Tier and the Finger Lakes. But at the end of the day, if there's $1 on the table and New York City wants it, they've got the votes to take it every time.
One moment, and it's next. So on April 8th, 2024, we're going to be having a full eclipse of the sun up here. Maybe that would be a great day to invite
That's a good idea.
all the assembly people, all the senators and the governor and her people to come up here.
Hopefully, we're not still working on the budget.
See what and see what it's like to live in St. Lawrence County and try to get around.
That, you know, that's, so on that front, I know it's not St. Lawrence County, it's Tupper Lake in Franklin County, but on the Adirondack Sky, they're a new observatory right outside of Tupper Lake. And I was just there last week and they were excited about it. And they are directly under the path of totality. And they're an observatory, so you know their mission, it lends itself to them. We had a lengthy discussion about next April. And I traveled to South Carolina in August of 2017 to see that eclipse. It was on my bucket list. I wanted to see it. I went down there, and you know, it was an awesome. You know, if you're into science or space even a little bit, that's something to see. So that is firmly on my radar, and I can't wait for that. And I've never played hooky, but if a session falls that day, unless we're voting on a budget, I may need to have an in-district emergency to catch that eclipse. But I agree with you that depending on the session schedule, that is an opportunity, and you know, Deb's taking notes there, and that's something that I think that's a great suggestion. So thank you.
Mrs. Haggard was next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Senators. You represent a very diverse area, divided pretty evenly between the political parties and a big chunk of people that aren't affiliated. I just wanted to say that I appreciate your efforts to represent everybody.
Trust, thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
I do mean that. Thank you very much for being here.
On that note, I mean, look, you all see me in the paper, and you all, you know, if you want to, you can check my voting record, and I don't think anyone will be surprised with any of my votes. But I tell everybody, my #1 goal in life, doing my job, is I want to be reasonable. And I want myself to remember this, and I hope that everyone that I work with remembers that. Mine isn't only vote, opinion, ego, mortgage, tax bill, property, kid. We all have that. And, you know, we all love them. And you look at what's going on in the world, you look at what's happening right now with Hamas and Gaza and Israel. I just came back from Ireland, and they've had 25 years of peace. You know, I mean, they still don't love each other, but they're making it work. You know, that whatever our differences are in America, or certainly state politics, we all agree, whether we realize it or not, we all agree on the vast majority of stuff. We want our kids to have a fair shake, we want safety, we want everyone to have an opportunity to have freedom to pursue a dream, to earn a living that they can afford. We all agree with that. We start, there are some important, but niche issues, and I say niche issues in that, not that they're not important, but they don't affect everyone. But I think education, safety, criminal justice, affordability, economics, environment. Those are things that I think we all have a great deal of agreement on. You start getting down to the weeds and how to on the environment, how to on the safety, and we're going to start to disagree. But then you take your head up and you look around at the rest of the world. We agree on most things. It's never about the personality. For me, I may disagree with somebody, but I'll talk about the issue. I don't think in the 30 minutes I've been talking, I have one said Democrat or Republican. I've hinted at, conference or the others, because it is like there's Republicans and Democrats in this room. But you know what? I do represent an awful lot of Democrats. I do represent the fastest growing enrollment, which is the blank. People that have had it with all of us and say, but I always tell them, I say, voting is optional, picking a party is optional. Let's see what happens if you don't pay your taxes. Somebody's coming knocking on your door. And so I try to approach it that way. Believe me, I'm a big guy. If I want to be an ogre, I can. It comes naturally to me, but I don't think that serves the public a good either. So thank you for your comment.
Mr. Reagan.
Senator, I was just pleased to see you were talking about the eclipse, and I'll send you a copy of our musical playlist for the eclipse.
Now, how much totality do you have here in Canton? I'm gonna look at a map and there's like gonna be a band of the total path of totality. And I want to be on the line in the center of that band. I
Go
want
to
to have a
Ogdensburg.
second. Yeah.
Go to Ogdensburg.
Yes,
We will be in the middle of it.
I have a small inn in Ogdensburg, and we have people coming from Tennessee, from Washington State, from all over the place. We expect a lot of Canadians to come down, so it should be a very fun time, and it's exciting. And our emergency services department is trying to figure out how to manage the challenges that will also arrive, but
Somebody should be trying to figure out a way to monetize.
well, that's what was happening. And
And all kidding aside, so at the Adirondack Observatory, one of the things that their executive director is emphasizing to me is to be prepared for crowds are coming. And again, if it's not on your radar, you're like, who cares, solar eclipse, all right, that's a space nerd. All right, but there are a lot of people out there like me that will travel. I traveled to South Carolina around that event to see that event. It's over in 3 minutes. But there's the getting there and the getting out of there. You will have a lot of traffic. You will, there are probably already, the rooms are probably already booked. You're going to have a lot of people coming here, so be prepared for it. But it's an opportunity. The only downside is that it's a one-day event. You can't, it's not like the Saratoga race season. You got to have one day and weather dependent. I mean, something's still going to happen, whether it's cloudy out or not, but it'll be better if it's clear. And we were fortunate the day that we were there. It was a beautiful day. We were in my wife's cousin's pool, and it was just us. And you got dusk, and you heard the cicadas and all the evening birds came out. And they were flying around, and you could see the animals were confused. They got notably cooler. You could feel it. The air temperature got cooler. And 3 minutes later, it was over. But it was really powerful. Now. I had thought I want to be in a mountaintop to experience this, it'd be really cool in the Adirondacks to be a mountaintop. And actually he suggested, he goes, the thing is, an event like this, be appreciated in a large group, because it'll be almost like, like a spiritual kind of, when, you get a large number of people together that are experiencing something that unique, And now you're talking about, you know, a World Series game, you know, some event that you just have a shared consciousness, a lot of, so he maybe gave you some thought about that, like, you know, there might be something to be said about experiencing this in a large crowd. I did it in a small gathering a few years ago. But you should be prepared as a county. You will have people coming in and you'll have some challenges, I think, it's a good problem to have. But a problem you will have.
Mr. Hall,
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's a second, I really appreciate you being here, and I think play the time. Busy. Before I ask the question, how's the office working out?
Great, thank you. Yes, thanks for the reminder. The office is exactly what we wanted out of it. I'm blessed to have Mark and Kevin covering for me. You know, I know that they're great ambassadors for me personally, but the space is perfect. Your staff has been great to work with. No complaints. You know, it's exactly what we're looking
okay,
Madam Chair, I mean,
go ahead.
that was just free.
Buttering you up.
Second bite at the apple. So this one isn't a softball, but you took the job, you know the deal. So this summer, our beloved state education department published guidance for public schools, which said that each student is in charge of their gender transition, and it encouraged public school officials, teachers included, to assist children to begin their quote gender transition at school without parents' knowledge, and I'll just quote, discuss the school's role in supporting the student's transition, which may include hormone therapy or gender affirming surgeries. End quote. So my question, where are you and your colleagues on either side of the aisle? This doesn't need to be a partisan question, but what are you working on to address the state's ambition to confuse children and potentially hide medical procedures from their parents?
I think you're right. This is not necessarily a partisan issue. This is where we start to see that separation, right, of areas of agreement. Now, me personally, I am very big on parental rights. The child, up till they're 18, my child. It's not the state's child, it's not the school's child, it's my responsibility, it's my child. And with that said, the counter argument always is, well, you have some instances where the parent is a bad parent. Well, there's mechanisms for that. If the parent's truly a bad parent, the state has authorities to step in there, but the garden variety, does my kid get a shot or not get a shot? Does my kid make a life-changing decision on their gender? Are they qualified to do that at 6, 7, 8 years old? Absolutely not. But there's legislation in Albany, and I don't recall how much of it has moved or not moved, but there's bills. You know, I mean, state ed is putting this stuff out, but they're not doing it in a vacuum. I mean, you know, they are doing this because it's either been authorized by law or the governor has authorized it if the governor has authority to do that. So this isn't necessarily the state ed weighing it. This is coming out of Albany, and it's either because it's in legislation, and that legislation could be one of the 10 budget bills of that is $227 billion. I mean, that's the frustrating part, is that, you know, the budget of our size should be constrained to the financial plan. That's $227 billion should speak enough on its own. But a lot of policy, a lot of controversial policy weasels its way into, this is where the $1 billion for the migrants in New York City is, and this is where the $500 million for CHIPS is. This is where this local government good thing is. And but some of these bills, and there's some of the controversial bills that are in there and they sit for a long time because there's bipartisan opposition to them. So just because there's bills written doesn't mean that a vote is imminent. And like I said, I wasn't necessarily prepared to know like what have we done legislatively recently to, specifically on this issue, but there are a lot of bills that go through, whether it's gender transition or vaccinations, where, that's the parents. I don't want the government and the parents. Again, I fully recognize that there are some parent, why does a girl need to go seek abortion services without her parents knowing? Well, maybe the father is the father. So I understand that. However, there should be circuit breakers in legislation to err on the side of the parent needs to, if the school nurse can't give Johnny an aspirin, then the school should not be involved in Johnny's transition or a vaccination. And when I was in the Navy, I was a pinch, right? They said, get the shot, I got the shot. That's carried forward, I still got the shot. The more I watched though, the more I said, hey, you know what, maybe these people that are criticizing the shot aren't nuts. You know, I mean, there's more to it here, where, you know, as it went on, it didn't age well. And the people that were skeptical of it, I think over time, it was proven that they had basis to be skeptical. I still got the shot. If it was today, I'd get the shot. But I suspect that as a population, they're gonna have a lot more difficulty giving the shots and masking this up again in the future. Because I think a lot of people are like, yeah, you know, you weren't 100% honest with us the last time. But when it comes to people's kids, you know, it's theirs and not the state's. And I think a lot of legislators on both sides of the aisle feel that way. It's a hot button issue. It's something that people like to talk and read about because it's interesting. It gets people really fired up. So it's good for good reading and good television sometimes. And not to minimize the issue, it's an issue. But at the end of the day, you know, that minor child is the responsibility of the parents.
Does anybody that hasn't spoken have anything to say before I go for seconds? Mr. Shea.
Back in the eighties, I was a legislator and I'm a legislator now, and basically, I was a town councilman for a long time, in a smaller group of small councilmen. Town councilman, I thought I could do a lot of things. A lot of times here, one of the things I do is ask for an adjournment. Basically, so I don't feel like I'm accomplishing an awful lot. Would you tell us, since you've been a state senator, what you would be proud to say that you helped accomplish?
You know, so specific to my district, you know, legislation, when we're in Albany, legislation with your name on it is usually, you know, something that that we measure our success by. And in that regard, you know, nature of Albany, the partisan politics that it is, the majority usually controls legislation in that process with an iron fist, and the minority, it's you know, you're fighting a headwind. So as a member of the minority conference, to get a statewide bill through, it is a bit of an achievement. And I did have an invasive species bill that I brought with me. It was the idea when I was in local government at the town. And again, it's not going to save the planet, save the world, but bear with me. It was a good idea, and the Senate seemed to embrace it. It was the Assembly that struggled with it a little bit more than I thought they would, but the governor did just sign it. If you wanted to create a taxing district to manage invasive aquatic plants, no problem. Any town can do that. There, you know, the town council writes that up. That's off the shelf legislation. Just fill in the blanks. You know, have a public hearing. It's not. You don't need special state legislation to manage aquatic invasive plants. Now, Lake George, and Lake George isn't the only one. Not all invasives are plants. You have Asian clam. You have zebra mussels. If you want to manage something that's not a plant, you would need special legislation to create that taxing district. Now, why create a taxing district? Well, because I don't want to ask my neighbors that live in the poor end of town, 3 miles from the lake, to shoulder the burden for fighting Asian clams on a small lake, you know, for their wealthier waterfront property owners. They have the benefit of that. It lends itself to creating a taxing district. Not that I'm a big fan of taxes, but you know, if you're gonna attack a problem, the people that benefit from the problem, from the solution, generally should pay for it. That's the idea behind the district. But if you wanted to do that for a non-plant, you couldn't do it. You need special legislation. All I wanted was to say, hey, you know what? Let's add this in for invertebrates. You know, it was almost as simple as a change of that. The lawyers, you know, made it more words than that, but and after a couple of years of trying, we did get the bill passed, and the governor did sign it last week. Again, not going to change the world, but now there's an option for a town that says, oh, geez, if this was milfoil, we could create this district, but it's not milfoil, it's quagga mussel, and we can't. So we'll pass the hat, or the general fund will pay for it, or worse, nothing will, you'll just ignore the problem and it'll get worse. So in my time in the legislature, I've passed a few constitution amendments having to do with the Adirondacks. I passed them in the Senate. They've been stuck in the Assembly. They're being carried by an Assembly's majority member. So being in the majority isn't always automatic for getting your legislation through. Sometimes it's, are you a dog with a bone? And I was once called by the chairman of the Assembly FinCom committee. He said of me to Betty Little, he said, Dan is a nudge without being a nag. Now, I know a lot of people that say he's crossed that nag line a long time ago. But, as far as getting your legislation through, you want to be persistent and nudge without irritating people. I've had a lot of success, I think more success than most Republicans, both in the Assembly and the Senate, with legislation, because I hopefully I come across as that reasonable person that I'm reasonable in my asks, my expectations, and I'm not a troll. And you come to me and say, I may disagree with your idea. Well, I won't make fun of the idea. I'll just try, there's a way to play the game. So I think I've had success in Albany because of my mindset, my approach, and as far as how I interact with. And I do think that the Senate is more member driven than the Assembly because it's smaller. So I think that the work ethic or the personality of the individual senator working in a smaller group than 150 member assembly. The Assembly is more straight staffed, whereas the Senate is a little more collegial because we're a smaller group. But I mean, our conference, a lot of our wins are in stopping bad legislation from moving forward, and you may never read about it in the paper, but you just stare them off and you ask hard questions, and you're like, yeah, all right, this isn't something. Because we're pointing out bad legislation, but I'm not sure if I answered your question, Dean, but
And I think you did. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Mr. Sheridan.
I too would like to thank you, Senator, for being here this evening. You've been very informative. I do have one question that I don't think anyone's touched on, and that is, you probably remember a while ago now, some while ago, the governor appointed a 15 commission group to repurpose some of the correctional facilities that we closed down up here in the North Country. And I was a little disappointed when I first saw the list that it didn't look like there was any representation up here in this North Country. And we have several correctional facilities up here, two of which just closed recently, as you know. Is there any progress? Do you get a progress report, Senator, from this commission as to what their progress that they're making and what efforts they're making and what things are maybe cooking or anything along those lines?
I've seen no formal report out of that commissioner task group that the governor created to repurpose. I haven't gotten any report that I. All right, but we'll check to make sure. But to your point, whether it's correctional facilities, the Battle of Plattsburgh, Valcour Island, Crab Island, I've been involved in. They fall. The Battle of Plattsburgh was September 9th through the 11th, 1814. And it's a big deal in Plattsburgh. So I've been there the last few years, and there's some needs there and some grounds that are owned by the state. 135 member mass burial on Crab Island, which is a tiny island north of Valcour Island. Overgrown with brush, the graves aren't marked, they're not even sure where they are, but they know they're on that island. A monument and a flagpole, they're in desperate need of repair. My point is, Office of Parks, not Department of Corrections, with all those facilities. And then DEC, I'm the ranking member of the Environmental Conservation Committee. My dad's a retired forest ranger. I'm a 46, I'm all over. I talk about Essex County and overuse and hikers and all that. DEC is not kept up with trail maintenance, lean-tos. They rely on volunteer groups. So my point is that the state has been a poor steward of land, not just in corrections, but in a lot of different areas. They walk away and abandon a piece of property. It sits and it starts to look like something from a Will Smith movie. That is a disservice to our residents. Mariah Shock just closed, and I know Ogdensburg closed, I think the same closure. The direction that we're going, I've already heard, not through official, I'm hearing from like corrections officers, not from Doc's, Doc's staff or the governor's office, but with the head count where it is, it's always possible that there's gonna be more closures. Then you start hearing what an awful budget we're walking into. I would not be surprised if they look at further closures. But, to let these assets go, vacant in the North Country winter, if you're not heating it. Now, my understanding is Ogden, where they are heating. And as a matter of fact, we had a conversation just earlier today about, maybe potential future use for a place like Ogdensburg would be veterans. I know that Mark Walsh has already done a little bit of work on that. So I was nudged to connect with Mark on that subject, and I'm a member of the Veterans Committee, 11 years, and I'm finally, I'm a Navy veteran, but it took me 11 years before I got on the Veterans. And that's a good committee, as far as bipartisan or nonpartisanship. In the Senate, that is a very nonpartisan group. And a lot of good work comes out of that. But no, I mean, I think the state's been a poor steward in a lot of areas. And that gives me pause for saying, you know what, then maybe we shouldn't be buying any more land in the Adirondacks. If we can take care of the lands and the infrastructure that we already had. There was a recent article in the paper, I can't remember which one it was, about unit management plans in the Adirondack Park. They're supposed to be done every 5 years, and there are some property that has never had a unit. The state's owned for 50 years, and it's never had a unit management plan passed. So we don't have enough staff to manage the bureaucracy of land ownership. So that's prompted me just thinking, we're working on a letter and an op-ed highlighting exactly, to your point, hey, these correctional facilities are falling apart that we've abandoned. And oh, by the way, it's not just docks, it's DEC and this, and it's parks and that. And, I'm just trying to highlight that, I'm not in a hurry to spend any more money than we have to, but you know what? You have an asset, and if you're not gonna take care of it, it's gonna degrade, and that's not a good option.
Thank you, son.
So thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I hope I didn't take too much time.
We know you have to drive back.
I'm gonna drive back, but what's your agenda for tonight?
So this is operation.
Okay.
So we have a little bit from emergency services, which by the way, thank you for supporting direct payments from insurance companies to EMS. And then I have a little something about October is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We have some vacancy committee reports.
If I could, though, you prompted me with emergency services. One of the big issues that I've worked on off session this year is cell towers in the Adirondacks in the Blue Line. Cell service is an issue everywhere. Some of it is ruralness and topography, certainly around here, and certainly in the Adirondacks, the geography starts to become an issue. But there's so much use and capacity now that that cone of service shrinks on these towers because there's so many people on it. So now places that historically had good coverage or aren't challenged by a rural nature or by topography like Utica, Plattsburgh, Glens Falls, Albany, they're starting. So cell quality, cell coverage is already an issue, but in the Adirondacks, the APA has a tower policy that's 23 years old. It's 5 years older than the iPhone. And we did a survey, and some of you may have seen it. We did a mailer out, and we got 2,000 in the back. We sent it just to the communities that are in or adjacent to the Adirondack Park. And one of the questions we asked was, do you own a cell phone? And do you have, if you have a cell phone, do you still have a landline? 99% of the people said they had a cell phone. 2/3 of them said they only have a cell phone. So people are getting rid of their landline. The angle that I'm going at this and I met, and one of the people that that prompted this whole thing of thought came when I was in Clifton Pine last year, and we met at lunch with one of your emergency coordinator. I can't remember his name. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So he did, because I know that you were working on some projects down cell towers down there. But so I'm pushing two things with the second floor. One is a public-private partnership. Hey, the environmentalists don't want a lot of these things in the park, and they don't want them any higher than they have to be. Why don't, and they're expensive, so rather than each cell company do their own thing, you have your own radio needs for fire, for EMS, for your DPW. Why don't we look for areas where we can build one tower, share the costs between government, put our gear on it, and the cell carriers, put their gear on it. So I'm pushing for a public-private partnership similar to broadband. And then the other thing, though, is a public safety argument that, hey, you could have, Messina just got a brand new engine delivered this past weekend. And, the apparatus says $500,000 or up, depending on what you're buying. And you can have the best paid, the best trained, the best equipped police, fire, and EMS. But if 2/3 of the people only have cell phones, and in your county, I talked to Brooks Big Work last year, I was asking, hey, what kind of percentage of 911 calls start on a cell phone? I can't remember what the number was he said, but they're all 70, 75, 80%. You can have the best first responders in the world and the best equipment. If that cell phone can't make that and call to initiate that response, then all that's worthless. So I just wanted you to be aware that the vein that I'm taking at this is a public-private partnership and the importance of it from a public safety perspective. And I'm sure that it's important to St. Lawrence County and all the counties in the Adirondacks. I just wanted to report, that's something off session that I've been working on. So hopefully you'll see more on that from me and we'll see if we can get the state to do something for self coverage in the Adirondacks. Sorry to extend my time.
You're fine. You're welcome.
Thank you for having me. You guys have been, fantastic to me. The only change in the redistricting is I picked up a big chunk of St. Lawrence County. So I'm new to the zoo here, and you guys have welcomed me, with the building. But certainly all of you, my phone is always open, and my cell phone is not a state secret. If you don't have it, somebody next to you's got to have it. And I know Mr. Butt. So, by all means, I'd rather hear from 5 of you than hear from none of you and miss something. So don't be shy. We're reaching out. That's everybody. All right, have fun. Be nice to Mr. Button. Please.
Thank you.
So I did say that John Jeanette, Legislator Jeanette has been excused tonight from this meeting. On the emergency services, Mr. Jenner there. Jonathan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So the first resolution I have is modifying the 2023 budget for emergency services for fiscal year 22 state Homeland Security Program grant from the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, moved by Mr. Forsythe, seconded by Mr. Smithers. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Sure. So this is just reallocating some of our budget money that was in our Homeland Security grant, just moving it from technical equipment into computer software to fund our maintenance agreement with Spellman.
Any questions for Mr. Mitchell? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Next up, I have a resolution modifying the 2023 budget for emergency services for overtime and electricity expenses, moved by Mr. Forsythe, seconded by Mr. Deitch and Mr. Perkins.
Thank you. So, yep. So with our, we're short on employees, which is resulting in more overtime. So we had to put more money into our overtime budget, as well as our tower electricity. As we add more equipment into our shelters, our electricity bill is going up. So that's just to subsidize that money.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Mitchell? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Next up, I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Intrado Life and Safety Solutions Corporations for system equipment and software for the backup 911 center, moved by Mr. Sheridan, seconded by Mr. Perkins. Go right ahead, Jonathan.
So as we work on the public safety renovation, Once we all start working at a Messina, we're not going to have a backup. So in order to have a backup, Intrado offers a solution where they can issue laptops and server equipment. So you can answer 911 phone calls and administrative lines remotely as long as you have a backhaul into that server. So this is to fund 2 laptops to remotely answer 911 and administrative lines, as well as the maintenance for those as well.
Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Entrado Life and Safety Solutions Corporation for professional services to relocate, install, and program the phone services in the new Office of Emergency Services 911 Dispatch Center. Moved by Mr. Lightfoot, seconded by Mr. Tanisha. Go ahead, Jonathan.
So this resolution is the professional services it would take to move our phone system from where it currently sits up into the new renovated dispatch center.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Mitchell? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Jonathan, thank you very much for your time. Did you have anything else for us?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day. I would like to put forth a resolution recognizing October as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Recommended by Mr. Forsythe, seconded by Mr. Taggart, Mr. Webster, Mr. Deisha, Mr. Manelli. And recommendation for screening is age 40 for women. If you have a family history 5 years earlier than when the breast cancer was detected. Monthly self-breast exams catch, they say 85 or more % of lumps that people go on to get care for. I think sometimes in the middle of everything else that we do, we forget to remind women to care for themselves. They care for everyone else. So I just wanted to recognize October as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month and have this resolution. Anyone want to? Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. I don't think we recognize often how fortunate we are in the North Country to have multiple highly capable and specialized cancer centers in our backyard. It's actually not, we shouldn't take it for granted. It really is exceptional that we have our community has access to really excellent world-class oncologists, oncology nurses, radiation therapists, and a whole team supporting them in multiple hospitals. It really is exceptional, and you don't think about it until either you work there or you need care, right? And so I just want to thank the many people who are working in multiple facilities to maintain that service. It really is exceptional, and it hasn't always been the case. You go back 20 years, and there wasn't care in our region, and now we have something to be proud of. So, anyway, thank you for bringing this forward.
Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution carries. Vacancy committee, this is Dawn.
So the vacancy review committee met on October 3rd and reviewed 12 positions from 8 departments. You do have on your desk a replacement vacancy for the sheriff's office. The first vacancy we'll review in just a few minutes. The secretary for the sheriff, the publications that we have been adding to the back on the draft that you received were incorrect. So they have been updated and they will be updated on our website. But that I'll speak to in just a few minutes. Wanted to mention to you, if I'd like to keep you updated, we reset in August associated with the vacancy reporting that I do. And for those 2 months, we are at 100% immediate fill. So that I think gives the board certainly has endorsed departments' needs where they exist. And those positions, while sometimes challenging to fill, do not have the obstacle of the board's approval in their way. We currently have at the beginning of October a 10% vacancy rate. And I did want to clarify for you on the summary that you've received. I added a new category called reasons vacated. And I mentioned that to you, I believe it was last month or maybe the month prior. that we were starting to see a little bit of a change in the transition between resignations and transfers. And so what I thought we'll do, that'll just be the current month on that right-hand side. So you'll get a better idea of how many retirements we're seeing, how many resignations. I do need to correct that. Resignations listed at 5 this month, it's actually 4. 1 promotion, we'll keep that updated. That 1 that I took away from resignations is actually 1 internal transfer. And then the 2 new positions that are being requested that you'll hear about next time. So I thought that gives, we often get questions when these vacancies are presented individually about why folks are leaving. So that gives you a quick look at what those positions, the reasons they became vacant. And certainly if there are other issues that need to be addressed, those can be in the proper venue. But that gives you a quick snapshot of what we're looking at. And to that end, if there's no other questions, I'll move on to the vacancy. Okay, so I'm presenting for the sheriff this evening. The secretary to the sheriff position is truly the clerical role existing on the road patrol side. This position handles the schedules, spoils, all the functions to run the offices. They manage the process for the issuance of equipment and uniforms. They manage the petty cash. They draft as clerical would all correspondence and all of the functions that in a very busy office are required to be completed. Also, the face of the office, once you're inside the suite, this position welcomes and preps for meetings and other issues going on in the department. So this would also be a request for an immediate fill. Questions? Okay, so next up we have the county clerk, who I believe is joined us. The county clerk has 1 citizen.
Position possible, May of 2004, realize user can be fired or passport. So I need trained ability to process those.
Have 2 positions, district attorney.
Position, first position on your this investigator's primary function is to assist the Department of Social Services in investigations involving individuals who fraudulently claim benefits, whether that's by not being completely honest on the applications they put in, or different various means. So this position will continue to do that. It will continue to assist the Department of Social Services in that role. But in addition to that, I will also have them transition, assisting our chief confidential investigator with other investigations as well. My office is reimbursed by the Department of Social Services for the salary of this position. And the Department of Social Services is reimbursed by the state. I believe it's 72% of the salary is reimbursed to them. So we're looking to fill that. It's been vacant since I believe the beginning of September. Will certainly be a good addition and necessary addition to the office. My investigator does a lot of work assisting local agencies around the county, including the sheriff's office. Numbers are down across law enforcement, including the state police. My investigators have been assisting in many investigations, including the fugitive issue that we had. My investigator was involved in that. Certainly this position would be involved in this kind of investigation.
Questions for the district attorney on this position? Mr. Taggart.
Did you say that it was reimbursed at 70%?
So yes, the department reimburses my office at 100%. And then the Department of Social Services, I believe, is reimbursed by the state for 72% of the salary, is my understanding.
So Legislator Hager, the reason it's not included under vacancy is because it's under contract. And so it actually goes into the claim for social services, not as a position that works for social services.
Thank you. I was confused.
Yeah, I have
That's
a
why.
question.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions?
Seeing none.
Next, Chief Assistant District Attorney.
Yes, in the middle of September, my current chief assistant informed me that she'd be leaving the position. He is moving on from public service. He decided that enough is enough. Sometimes this can be a thankless job, and she is moving on to other endeavors, I believe, outside of the law in total. So at this point, I will be promoting my deputy chief assistant to that position, and eventually coming back to backfill his position. But I believe he'll do a fine job moving up. And
Questions? Moving on now to the county administrator's report. Item listed there is resolution that comes in line following the NICE conference related to the next gen 911 system. The title is requesting Governor Hochul to sign Senate Bill S 4583A and Assembly Bill A 5942A, amending the county law in relation to the next generation 911 system and emergency services internet protocol network. I would ask for consideration.
Mr. Lightfoot, seconded by Mr. Perkins.
So this is an abbreviated bill that talks about if the state is going to require next gen 911, that they also support that financially. And as we have found in legislation, it does include the words as subject to appropriations, which doesn't always give us great hope that it will be funded. However, emergency services continues to be well funded. We have yet to have to pay the entire cost of one of our interoperability towers, even though the communication at the onset of this 7 towers ago was that we may have to come up with the cash if in fact the funds received in the variety of grants that emergency services receives and can compete for are no longer present. That has yet to occur. And even as Senator Steck mentioned tonight, the 2 towers that we're looking at and working on now, again, we were looking at state funds to accomplish that. So when we say that, we always pause with the subject to appropriations, but in fact, all of our efforts that you're seeing, both in the renovations and with the radio system that are considerable ARPA fund investment, all seek to see that the state commits to getting us all moved forward into next gen. Questions?
Seeing none. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Any opposed?
So this is by way of updates. The bids are out. I sent a communication on to all of you with the link. So share along to any contractors who've reached out to you. I know there've been a few. Finally, happy to say those bids are on the street for this incredible project that has been in planning phase for much longer, we hope, than it is in construction. They were released on October 6th. A walkthrough will occur on November 2nd, with bids to be opened on November 16th. So all of that information is live and active on our website. If you need assistance, we certainly can point folks in the right direction. I wanted to let you know on October 7th, the St. Lawrence County State of Emergency was extended once again through November 5th, and there are no emergency orders issued at this time. Wanted to give a quick update and certainly yield to Legislator Webster if he'd like to comment. The committee to review the arming of probation officers has continued to meet. We met last Thursday on the 12th to review the survey results. A survey of department staff was put out for 2 weeks, and those results were captured and returned to the committee, along with a terrific presentation by our neighbors in Clinton County on all perspectives related to arming of officers. So we had an officer speak, a probation supervisor speak, 2 officers and 2 supervisors, in fact, and the probation director, who all came to the topic from different perspectives and with different opinions. And so the committee really got to hear a broad spectrum of a county that is armed, of a county that has issued weapons for officers, and a county that has had officers decide to not arm. So it was really an informed discussion at the last committee meeting, and we will be continuing to gather information. Our next meeting, we're hoping to have our planning office facilitate a SWOT analysis whereby we can pull together the information that's been discussed and determine what other steps are necessary before a recommendation can be returned to the board of legislators. Questions on that? A couple of other initiatives. Want to mention anything else?
It was actually a great presentation. They just about mirrored us perfect. And like Administrator Ruth said, there was people on both sides of the board. There were people who used to carry and stopped carrying. There was people who didn't want to carry and didn't want to carry. And, you know, half of the department carried and half didn't. I mean, it couldn't have been a better. Tim did an excellent job of picking out, you know, people who committed top. And it was so rounded and so fair that, you know, but it was very enlightening. It was really good. And we got all the, or a lot of the questionnaires back, which gave us a lot of information on what people were looking at. I think they're just as confused at what it's going to entail too. You have some people that do want to, and some people that don't want to. And crime has changed so much. Let people out of criminals out of jail that they're overseeing now that typically might have been, you know, lower charges. Now it's drug charges and charges that are, some of them are very dangerous people. So, I mean, their environment has changed so much in the last 5 or 10 years since they've released so many, you know, people. Just crime is different. It was a great presentation. Thank you, Ruth.
Absolutely, I thought so too, and never boring. The county attorney presented on case law specific to the liability component, where that resides, the DCJS, and that information is shared out. It certainly will extend along to all legislators as well. So our next meeting, as I mentioned, we're going to go over sort of the culmination of the information we have so far and determine our next steps. Did want to mention to you that the EMS information that you have been accustomed to receiving is now on the board share in the under emergency services that was emailed out today. Last Thursday, CSEA President Amy Simmons had on site, she posted a visit from statewide leadership from CSEA, our statewide treasurer and secretary. We're here to visit and tour the facility and visit with our staff. So we had an opportunity, I got to give them the tour of this room and talk to them about our committee process and our board process and how things happen and work in St. Lawrence County. I did want to mention to you this year, I think I briefly mentioned it in the spring, but as a result of our Health and Safety Committee meeting with CSEA, the county's working on adjusting our workplace assessments. Now, this is an evaluation of the potential of the environmental side of the workplace violence situations. And we are adapting to a schedule where we're going to do those in the fall. And so those are underway now, along with our risk manager shepherding the effort throughout departments with union representation to make sure that all issues are noted. And we'll convene the Health and Safety Committee again in November to have those issues addressed alongside the training that we have to conduct annually. So this is the first year that we're taking that out of sort of a spring implementation, pulling that to the fall so we can be prepared for 2024. And then lastly, if we could, Sherwin, I'd like to ask County Attorney Button and Treasurer Cole to give us their perspectives. They recently traveled to Chicago to the National Tax Lien Association Conference. And once that's complete, I'd ask them also to provide us with an update on the progress associated with transition with the city of Ogdensburg.
I believe it was already communicated that I am often long-winded but never boring. I am inclined to try to code this evening. Neither long-winded nor boring is my objective. And it's good to see the treasurer on here tonight. As the county administrator indicated, we did recently have opportunity to travel to the city of Chicago. Brief anecdote, as we were getting there, we had to secure a taxi to go to the downtown area, got into the taxi, and the taxi driver was very quick to tell us, don't worry about what you've seen on television. As long as you stay at the south side and the west side, you're all right. So, that we did. That we did. I think everybody is aware that there are a lot of changes that are on the horizon associated with the real property tax mechanisms that are taking place throughout all 50 states, not just New York State. We have been working on a New York State solution now since the Hennepin decision came down out of the United States Supreme Court. Tyler versus Hennepin was a case that originated out of the state of Minnesota, addressing what happens to recoveries during the course of the auction period on real property tax foreclosures and where they're supposed to go post-sale. This is obviously a huge matter of concern for all 50 states, even more so we learned for New York State than most other states, and I'll get to that in a second. While we have been traveling around the state, I've been speaking on the issue around New York State. We wanted to get a perspective on what's happening in the other 49 states. Obviously, these issues aren't just limited to New York State, and some of those states have already started to implement some of the changes. I don't know if you're aware, but I actually sit on the New York State Association of Counties Legislative Drafting Committee associated with the Hennepin response right now. So we were trying to get a sense of one, if there are things that we can do at the local level. Two, if there is state legislation needed, what that might look like. And three, if there's a model that exists out there in the ether of state real property tax foreclosure that we might be able to mimic or replicate. So we found the National Tax Lien Association. The National Tax Lien Association represents the interests of a number of different governmental entities as well as private entities, from Capital One Bank to First National Bank to the state of Arizona. We had representatives from Cochino County, Arizona there that were presenting, to New Jersey, to Florida, to Mississippi, to Texas. They were all in the Chicago area to present on this matter. It's a 2-day symposium that was put on by the National Tax Lien Association. It addressed everything from a 50-state response to Hennepin to the future of AI in real property tax foreclosure and redemption cycles. That was actually a really neat presentation. They actually were able to develop an AI model that was able to determine within a degree of certainty the percentage of properties that were likely to be redeemed prior to actual foreclosure. And they were able to identify on that AI model the likelihood of actual sale and the value of the sale if it ended up going to bid, which was something that was incredibly interesting. One of the things we did find out about AI is that garbage in, garbage out, it's data dependent. If you're not putting in appropriate data, you're not going to get the appropriate responses. But if you are putting in the appropriate data, there is a future potentially for AI in the real property tax foreclosure world. The main presentation dealt with how to address Hennepin and what other states are doing. As I indicated, the two primary states that presented were New Jersey and Arizona. Both of them have had to go to look at their state legislatures and ask them for assistance. One of the neat things associated with their interpretation of the Hennepin decision was that Hennepin would not have turned out the way that it had the state of Minnesota and the county proceeded on a foreclosure model that was based on abandonment. That because they did not proceed on a foreclosure model based on abandonment, it left them open to this type of challenge. And one of the things that they were really advocating for is that if you exist in a municipality where you are largely dealing with properties that property owners have taken off, left, abandoned, are no longer caring for, that you may consider moving in an abandonment front rather than moving on a general foreclosure for non-payment of taxes. While it is possible that non-payment of taxes draws your attention to the property, their failure to care for it, their failure to maintain the utilities associated with the property are what will drive you to act. It's essentially a blighted property process to clean up within towns and cities. Now, the second main presentation dealt with what are the other 49 states looking at. How are we going to find a solution that can apply across the board? And I was really surprised to see some things that I did not realize case. New York State, out of all 50 states, is the only hybrid state that exists. So let me explain what I mean by the only hybrid state that exists. Some states work on the Texas model, lien model. The lien model sells off the lien after there is a delinquency, they're immediately paid. You may be familiar with this model because a similar version was essentially effectuated by the city of Ogdensburg before the city of Ogdensburg has converted to our real property tax foreclosure model under Article 11. There are states out there where that is the only option that they have. They sell off the lien, a private investor goes ahead and bids on the lien, acquires the lien. After a certain period of time, they foreclose against the private entity. They get the people out of the location if they are still there, and then they redevelop the property. This is the dominant model that exists within the United States. More than 30 states actually operate on the lien sale model. We exist here in St. Lawrence County on what is known as the judicial foreclosure model. The judicial foreclosure model is where we commence an action pursuant to a notice of petition. We go through the statutory period to allow them an opportunity to file an answer, to potentially redeem. And if at the conclusion of that period of time they fail to file an answer, fail to redeem the property, we foreclose on it, we send it to auction. In election, we handle enforcement. We are in the dramatic minority of states that handle foreclosures by judicial solution. We also, as a state, permit that lien model, which is what calls us into the hybrid existence. We have both the capability under our to be a lien state. Under Article 11, we have the ability to be a judicial foreclosure state. So that makes New York State very unique in how it reaches its solution to the Hennepin issue, because we have to not only consider the judicial foreclosure model, which St. Lawrence County currently participates in, we have to consider the lien model, which many of our cities still engage in. They believe that it is a much more advantageous model for them to continue to be in that lien sale setup. This has created a significant amount of chaos within the investing groups, the banks that have been a part of the lien investment process. This has created a significant amount of uncertainty associated with those investments that's leading them to be concerned about the future of how those lien models will work. And it is forcing all of the state legislatures to sort of beef up what they're going to do. So as I indicated, Arizona and New Jersey seem to be the primary proponents of two sort of actions that we're really taking a close look at now here in New York State. One is an abandonment process that allows us to beef it up, as I indicated. The second actually is a process that would allow for applications made by the individual tax delinquents to the court during the pendency of the action for recovery of any excesses that they believe they're entitled to on notice to any lien holders that may have been extinguished during the foreclosure process. As you may know, when the county gains a judgment of foreclosure against a tax delinquent, wipe out all of the claims. If there's a mortgage sitting out there, get out. If there is a creditor sitting out there, cars, whatever, that is attached to lien to the house, wipe it out. It would be patently unfair under the law for a debtor to go through the tax delinquent process, have us wipe out their creditors, and then to force us to turn over anything that exceeds the tax delinquency acquired at auction. So one of the things that we really needed to work on was, what does the mechanism look like to not only protect the interest of the debtor, but to also protect the interest of the creditors that may be inadvertently wiped out as a part of the foreclosure. So it was a great seminar. It was a great symposium, very well attended. They do two major events annually. One is in the spring in March, and the other one is here in the fall in Chicago, or they actually bounce around. Sometimes it's in Kansas City. I understand sometimes it's Maryland, sometimes it's even Washington. Bounce around in the fall meeting. The spring meeting is always in March down in Florida. It was an educational process for us. I'm sure most people would have been bored. We spent a reception evening actually just discussing taxes. You know, there are fewer people out there that are more bored than those individuals who find fun spending 3 hours talking about taxes. That is what we did. Renee, I don't know if you have anything to add to what I have to say, but.
Yeah, no, I think that you covered it very thoroughly. Thank you.
2 minutes is over, Renee. Okay.
It was really enjoyable, and it, quite frankly, as it was educating for me, it educated me in something that was very locally applicable. Obviously, we're going through the process of converting and transitioning the city of Ogdensburg cycle this upcoming year. This new notice of petition that we are likely to file in the next 30 days will, for the first time, include city of Ogdensburg properties. We will be moving forward, and as we transition from a lien model in the city of Ogdensburg into our real property tax foreclosure model, it's called into question some prior local laws that we've had, some prior resolutions that we've had to revisit. And I think Renee can speak to this, but I'm just giving you forewarning, at the finance meeting that's coming up, you're probably going to see at least 2 local laws that will be added. One is the installment plan local law. As you know, St. Lawrence County has a local law that allows us to accept installment plans on villages and town unpaid taxes as part of the county collection process. In that local law passed in 1993, we specifically accepted cities. So no city resident would be able to participate in the city in the installment plan that we currently permit our town and village residents to participate unless we modify that local law. So one of the things we are going to be asking the Board of Legislators come the finance meetings to set a public hearing date so that we can amend that and allow the city residents to be able to participate just like the other residents throughout the county. The second local law that will be coming will be with respect to our dates of redemption. That is our standard foreclosure local law. We are going to be asking for changes associated with the dates of redemption in order to come further in line with the Hennepin decision. We will be essentially lifting the current date of redemption from 30 days prior to the auction to defaulting to the state last date of redemption, which is April 1st. This will provide a degree of flexibility for the county, for the board, and for the county treasurer that we do not currently have, but will allow us to come into conformance with the Hennepin decision.
Question? Mr. Burt?
Steve, are you suggesting to go to the lien?
The lien model is very difficult. In order to achieve the lien model, you have to be operating on a charter form of government. We are not a charter form. I'm not advocating to move forward. But there are significant steps that have to be in place before we can even move to the lien sale model. And I am not at this point.
So we would be under the obligation of having to return any excess to the individual.
Well, interestingly, if we proceed on a general foreclosure process, then yes. That was part of the reason why the abandonment discussion arose. Under the abandonment discussion, there is a perspective that the Supreme Court indicated that the local municipality does not have to.
Renee, do you want to speak to the work your staff has been doing with the city staff on getting ready for the implementation? I know they've been working very diligently.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. We met last week, I believe it was Thursday, internally, actually. The county attorney was present, real property staff and my staff. But I think just to do kind of a run through of all of the potential issues, kind of more like a brainstorming session, potential issues, and to develop that timeline and prepare for a meeting with the city staff. I have emailed the city of Ogdensburg on Thursday afternoon, asking to schedule a meeting. I sent about 4 different dates for this week. And we have not heard from them yet. I'm giving her, tomorrow I will follow up if I don't hear from them yet. We see this next meeting with the city will be more about the technical side of the implementation. It's going to be making sure that they're they have our dates, but they need to, I think we want to highlight the importance of the dates and the deadlines for the information that they have to turn into the real property office. We need to have a discussion again about the tax collection for on their part, because the city has indicated that they will collect county taxes similar in the manner to the way that towns currently collect through May. And we wanted to speak with them about changes to the city software that they use to collect. So that's kind of just the start of it. We're hoping to have that this week, and if not, very soon next week. I know that the real property tax office has already emailed a request, I think, for their re-levies, because that's something they typically ask. They emailed all the towns requesting that for that information. So the city of Ogdensburg was also emailed this week. So that really starts the ball rolling. There's a couple of other key deadlines on there that are coming up pretty quickly for tax bill information and budgets. So there's still a lot to discuss to make sure that they're able to meet all those goals, which they've indicated that they want to. But that's about where we're at as of this time. I can tell you kind of side discussion on that, not about the implementation of the tax collection, but about the 2022 delinquent taxes for the city of Ogdensburg that were turned into us. We reconciled them, I think, in about halfway through September. They were given to us in August. So we did cut a check today for $117,000 and change, and that is on the way to them. I did email the city manager and the comptroller to let them know. That represents the delinquent 2022 Ogdensburg city delinquent. I will say it doesn't seem as large as we might have expected, but I do expect we'll have a much larger number next year, because they have started the process of re-levying school taxes. I think it was about $960,000 that they re-levied onto their 2023 city taxes. And I'm sure a portion of those will probably remain unpaid too. So I think that's all I have so far on that. I don't know if there's any questions.
Questions from Mr. Forsythe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Renee, what if they don't meet all the requirements? Would it just be the same process that we're going through now? If it doesn't happen?
Yes, it will have to be. I mean, the deadlines and it's really real property that has to have the information in order to generate a tax bill. You know, I mean, it just like, I know that they've revised their local law to amend when they would adopt by. I know that I don't know where they're at in the process. I don't know that if they have accepted the budget yet from the city manager, but they had indicated that they are in on this. So if they don't meet the deadlines, we really won't be able to send it on the bill with our taxes this year. And it will have to default to how we're handling this year's, how we're going to have to handle the 23 delinquencies from the city. We're hoping to bill 24 and not have to, you know, this is really a much more labor intensive, I guess, and not as transparent process for taxpayers either. So we're hoping to get them onto the billing cycle, but we'll see how it goes.
Renee, if I may, one of the unintended consequences of the city's failure to pass a budget on time is that they cannot pass those numbers over to us for incorporation into tax. If they can't pass it over to us for incorporation into taxing, they can't wind up with bills. They can't wind up on bills in the time they pass, bills don't go out. So there is a real chain of events that takes place that we remain hopeful that the city will be on time with what we're.
Okay, let me follow up. Okay, so if it didn't happen, what about the tax foreclosure process?
That's not going to
remain.
that I'm continuing to rock forward. Like I said, this will be the first year that we will actually have city properties that are in there.
Okay.
The county treasurer and I have discussed the prospect of looking at several properties that are over in the city of Ogdensburg for some of our more exciting ventures that we'd like to engage in that you've heard about over the years. So we're hoping 2024 is going to be a better year for the city of Ogdensburg.
Okay, and one more back to your presentation, Steve. You have a rough idea what percentage of the properties this year at the tax sale would have fallen into the abandonment process versus?
Well, that's an interesting question, and that was something that the treasurer and I spoke. It depends on how the state statute defines abandonment. There are some state statutes that are out there, and we heard about this while we were at the NCLA. There are some state statutes out there that have a very stringent definition of abandonment. And you have to meet a whole series of criteria before you can get there. It's almost impossible to reach abandonment. There are some that define abandonment very loosely. Essentially, if a code officer has identified that it is condemned structure incapable of residential capacity, incapable of maintaining utilities, then the municipality may declare it abandoned on that basis. So without a pure definition that allows the county to determine that, that's a problem. Right now, under New York state law, if you take a look at the abandonment rules, the abandonment rules are very strict, and the county has no role in determining whether or not a property is abandoned. 1110A of the real property tax law actually vests that entire authority in the local codes office. So that takes the county out of the mix. So even if we saw a property that we thought was potentially condemned, should be moving in that direction, we can't do anything about it. It's solely at the discretion of the town or village or city codes officer. What we need to look to legislatively is the idea of incorporating a county component into it that allows us to exercise a degree of discretion and identify a criteria that we can easily dovetail to the real property tax enforcement.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Might have a little bit more information at some point in time about charter people and charter. Later, not today, ready?
I'll give you 10 seconds. County has already checked this out before. The 80s. It is a referendum process subject to each municipality. It failed back in the 80s when it was. It is a very difficult process to engage. It can be done. Counties have done so, but it is a very difficult process.
Is your opinion breakdown? Yeah, if you could at some point kind of give us a breakdown, yeah, advantage versus whatever. Okay. Anybody else have any questions for the county attorney? All right, so then thank you, sir. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Mr. Name. On to committee reports. On to committee reports, agriculture and farmland protection board distribution.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did the last meeting of the Ag and Farm Protection Board was Thursday, October 5th, and I was not in attendance.
Okay, thank you. Next to the alternative to incarceration boards, Mr. Burke.
There's nothing to report.
Thank you. The Board of Trustees for the Supreme Court Library, Mrs. Haggard.
Thank you very much. We will not meet again until June of 2024.
Thank you very much. The Emergency Services Advisory Board met the fourth Tuesday of last month. They talked a lot about the direct payment assembly and Senate bills that passed that are waiting for Kathy Hochul, Governor Hochul, to sign that would give direct payment to emergency services companies that go out and get people, where the people are getting a check from their insurance company, but it's not being passed on to the EMS provider that gives the services. So they asked us to pass the resolution that we passed. They've asked us to continue to support that. We have. They're asking now, could we write letters? Maybe we can put together some sort of a letter from the legislature to our governor, asking her to please sign this very important, maybe business changing legislation into law so that people can afford to fund their emergency services companies, especially important to our rural districts. We talked about the request for training. We already have ARPA funds that are available to train paramedics and EMTs. They are asking us to think about paying for the time that people, some sort of stipend, that people are sitting in the seats learning. Because as you know, many people would become an EMT or they would become a paramedic, but they can't afford to go without work for all these weeks that it takes. So as well as the ARPA money to pay for their coursework, they're asking if we would consider either using some of the ARPA money to pay for the seat time for paramedics and EMTs, with the understanding that they'd serve in our county some way. Or would we give money out of our budget to pay for EMT seat time? So I said I would bring that forward, and we have, and certainly there's additional information that I could bring to you via email about what classes are going to be offered, what the costs were going to be. I mean, for some of these courses that are 6 months long, sending 20 people would cost us a little bit of money, but I can get you exact figures. And then recently, Wyoming County went out on its own because it has, similar to us, a large landmass with not really great geography and the ability to have these little sparsely populated places have big enough groups of paramedics and such to be able to do all the transports from inter-hospital transports. There was a time, and I don't know if anybody realizes this, there was a time that if you had a critical care patient that was in your hospital and they needed to go to a tertiary care center like Burlington, Albany, Syracuse, for something that would be life-saving, we could call Fort Drum as a last resort. They would bring a chopper up and they would get our patient and they would take them to life-saving care. They will not do that anymore. There was a time that if there was family members of the state police, I don't know how far out they went, but certainly parents, spouses, etc., and they needed emergency transport, they would come and get them. They too no longer come to transport their own. So we are in a bad spot where sometimes when people are critically ill and need to go to Albany or Syracuse or Rochester, as far away as Binghamton, we send people for this specialized care. There's nobody to take them for 10, 12, 15 hours. So Wyoming County, because they had the same problem as we have, getting people not from where they're injured to the hospital, but from the hospital to the specialized care that we don't have in our county. They put together their own county-run EMS for some emergency stuff, but also to do inter-facility transports, which, as you know, is a building thing. So we've talked about that on many fronts. Ann Smith and I had a lengthy discussion about it the other night because this is new and she feels will be life-changing for Wyoming County. So I said I would bring it back as something for us to think about, because obviously, government is here to provide the things that local industry and businesses cannot. And I would have to say that as far as emergency transport to specialty care, sometimes emergency show up to take care of patients that are injured. The private sector is really not doing, not the way that we need it to be done. So I think it's something we have to think about and talk about again.
Question.
Yes, sir.
I'm very interested in that, and I think it's well worth reviewing. But I'd like to see something in front of me when I'm to review, as opposed to recalling what you mentioned tonight.
There would
So
have to be a great deal of work put into a presentation. This is just
if
a,
we're going to appropriate those kinds of monies, and you're talking a lot of money right there to accomplish that, I don't care how long it takes. We need to have something in front of us to look at and to make an informed opinion about.
absolutely,
Okay.
yeah, no, this is just from emergency medical services advisory board. What are they talking about? That's
Well,
part of what they're talking about.
and I understand that, but you said we want you, we would like to think about it. We would like to have this board think about it. If I'm gonna think about it, I want to have something in front of me to think about.
We'd be happy to get a presentation together, but while we're putting that together, just so you have it on the front part of your burner.
What are you looking at as far as time?
I think it would take a month or so to get a report like that put together. After the budget's done, I mean, because this includes a lot of work from where Matt sits, as well as and a lot of research as to where Wyoming's coming from, kind of what Livingston County came up from, a lot of numbers. It's a lot of work to do that presentation. Mr. Faithham.
I'd like to point out, yesterday, my sister's husband was transferred from Ogdensburg Hospital to Rochester General. And originally was gonna go by helicopter, and then they told me that basically, that it would take him 4.5 hours. And I said, how 4.5 hours? They said they couldn't get a plane or a helicopter available, and they took him by ambulance. And I guess he's doing a lot better than they ever expected. Now, so prayers are still with you. Understand that it is awful important that we get people that need emergency care,
Where they need to go.
especially hospitals. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's first time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the closer it hits the home is the more prevalent it becomes, for sure. Maybe we should form a committee to talk, to do this. Maybe I'll think about that and come up with an idea. And piggyback off other places, Washington County, whoever went through this recently, find out what they did, learn by their mistakes, definitely. But, it's definitely gonna be a number thing. Another thing that was popped up was the ARPA fund. How much is left in that? Do you have any idea of counting of what's available?
And quite a bit, because it was being paid for 2 students.
There is, and I think we have quite an interest with the paramedic program now, so I believe
Okay.
we can get an update.
Just,
for you.
yeah, just
Yep.
nice to know.
Okay, so that's it for my report. That's what people talked about. On to Environmental Management Council, Ms. Tina.
Thank you. Our last meeting was Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. I was not in attendance because we had open house at school, so I had that obligation. But according to the minutes, they talked about the ag tour. One of the representatives on the EMC was on the ag tour, so shared what that was like with the rest of the committee. Also talked, the newest planner, Mr. Joseph, had done a landfill visit, so shared with the EMC members some information about high value recycling materials, just how the different transfer stations are each unique, commingling versus sorting, those kinds of things. And that was pretty much the bulk of the agenda. There is an event, the Sustainability Day and Green Living Fair at Clarkson University on Saturday, October 8th from 10 until 3. And about all that's on there. Our next meeting is on Wednesday.
Thank you. Fire Advisory Board, Mr. Denise.
Madam Chair, our next meeting is Thursday, October 19th. Thursday at 6:30. Public board report then. One of the things I want to touch on is, and you brought it up, the emergency services provider resolution. I have shared that resolution that we passed with all of my town boards. And everyone thinks it's a great idea. Obviously, it puts a strain on the volunteer EMS services. People aren't getting the money that they should get. Somebody has to reimburse them. So I just wanted you to know that that's at least my 6 towns in one village has been
has been embraced.
Jury board, Mr. Sheridan.
Madam Chairman, the jury board has not met recently.
Thank you, sir. Planning board, Mr. Fay.
Our last meeting was Thursday, October 12th. Because of a conflict, I could not be there. And I was going to get a written report. But Jason, our planning board director, said he would be here, and I think he could better give a better report. He's willing to. Jason?
Romano. 5 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you. Yes, Legislator Fay mentioned we met last Thursday for our monthly meeting. Two main items were discussed. We had a training session where staff presented to the members present an overview of what local planning boards do and also what you'll do, just to get a better understanding for the board members of what role they actually play when they review projects that they see presented to them. And then two projects that were presented at the meeting. One was for a agritourism venture in the town of Messina between the Donahue Road and State Highway 131. It's quite an ambitious undertaking that's being proposed up there on about 120 acres of land. Just you can see now, but property owner. That was reviewed by the county planning board, and the second project was a local law or revision to a local law, our zoning law, adding some language docs to their county planning board review that document.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Old and business. Does anyone have any old business? Seeing none, any new business to be offered? Mrs. Hayward.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. Last Tuesday, I had an opportunity to attend the local government conference. Traveled from my home in Potsdam to CUNY Potsdam. I'm like going to Chicago. Did it go okay? It went great.
Okay.
It was a half day conference. I attended 2 of the workshops. It's the first time they've had the conference since the pandemic. They're intending to have it a full day next year. And one of the workshops was on planning, and it was facilitated by our very own Jason Boatnauer. I just want to throw that out there. He did a great job. It was a good opportunity to network with our local officials and hear info from many of the presentations were by state people. So thank you for the support from that conference.
Anyone else with new business? So I would like to say something. Oh, sorry, Mr. Burke. I didn't see you. I'm sorry.
Question for Ruth, when Gary for the vacancy committee said that he'd be back again. Because he's appointing with them. So is that, I thought we did away with that. Still do that? So
The backfills have to come back. If they've been filled longer than. If they're permanently appointed to the position, those backfills come to you again.
is that different?
That is different because highway's promotion schedule is incorporated into the contract in the appendix, so it's very prescribed. That is untrue for other departments.
Yeah. Everybody else is good? Mr. Gregory, you have something? No. Okay. So again, back to, some of us have talked about this, and I think that what's gone on in Israel and Gaza has sort of been on my mind. I think of Jimmy Carter, who was one of the first presidents that I remember, and he's always been sort of promoting peace since he's left office. And he said, we will not learn how to live together in peace by killing each other's children. I think that for everyone who's lost family in the last week, perhaps we could give them a moment of silence. in this chamber. Thank you. Do we have a need for executive session?
We do for litigation, negotiations, personnel, which is the medical, financial, credit, and employment history of a particular person or corporation. And that is appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation. And we have 8 appointments and 4 reappointments. No.
Motion to go into executive session, seconded by Mr. Hall. Go into executive session. All in Perhaps. She had one when I said that.
Eric. Going to the post.
Not familiar with that.
Oh, there's Kelly. That one rooms. Things. Posts. You've probably been there before.
Busy at work.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty late though.
Yeah, I'll have to read the email, but that work schedule. I'll have to see how that fits in with my work
Yeah.
schedule.
I don't think I'm gonna make it either.
Actually really enjoyed it.
It's a nice town.
I had been to Chicago many times before, but I had never seen the downtown area. When I was in college, I was an athlete, and so I was explaining to Renee that I had opportunity to travel to many beautiful, but never saw them.
Oh, yeah.
Frequently went to New Orleans,